Good morning. It is Saturday, November the 9th. I'm Ali Velshi. Politics is easier for most of us when the democratic ideals we cherish triumph, or at least persist. But to be politically engaged, which you likely are if you're watching me right now, is to not only risk losing an election, but to be prepared and to be willing to lose. To be politically engaged is to put it all on the line, knowing full well that the outcome, at least the immediate outcome, might not be the one you worked so hard for. I know this story well. I learned it when I was 11 years old, working on my father's first campaign in Canada. I learned on election night in 1981 when my dad and I, in the car on the drive from our home where we had gone to freshen up after a grueling election day, to the campaign headquarters. We expected the results to take a while to come in, so we were in the car when the polls closed. We turned on the radio, and the host said what I would learn to say years later when covering elections, that it's too early to tell who will form the government. But based on history and demographics and exit polling, things I was too young to understand at the time, they were able to project the results in one constituency, the one my dad was contesting. And what they announced in the first minute of the broadcast was that he had lost. It was just the two of us in the car that night. Little 11-year-old me was devastated. I looked at my dad. I said, "I can't believe we lost." He turned his attention away from the road for just a moment to look at me. With a smile on his face, he said, "Of course we lost. We were never going to win." I asked, "Then why did we do this?" "Because we could," he told me. "We ran because we could. And more people voted for the other guy than voted for me. It's okay. Life goes on." That blew my mind. But you see, he appreciated something I didn't. He grew up in apartheid South Africa, where he couldn't vote because of the color of his skin, let alone run for office. He literally ran because that's what civic engagement looked like to him, knowing full well that he would lose. He conceded his election that night, and I learned what civic engagement really meant. A small postscript: a few years later, he ran again, and he won, making history by being the first of his kind to win such an office anywhere on this entire continent. But his subsequent victory wasn't as instructive to me as his initial loss. The night of that loss cut deep. This week, I felt the depth of that cut again. Tuesday was different from November 8th, 2016, the night Trump was first elected. That felt like an accident. This didn't. This time, there was so much on the line. Women are dying. The earth is burning. Wars are being waged. Democracy really is on the brink. I'm fairly certain this country will see some dark days ahead. But you know what I don't know? I don't know where we are in this effort to forge a stronger democracy and a more perfect union. Just as rebel colonists didn't know on April 19, 1775, when gunfire erupted in Concord, Massachusetts, or on September 3, 1783, when the Revolutionary War ended with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. America had declared its independence from Great Britain 7 years earlier, a date we think of as the start of the nation. And yet on July 4th, 1776, this new nation was not even a quarter of the way through that war. America didn't know on April 11th, 1861, before the first shot was fired on Fort Sumter, how long that fight would take, or whether it would be much of a fight at all. Or on April 9th, 1865, after 750,000 Americans perished and Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. We still didn't know what the future of this country would hold. You can only know how these things end in hindsight, not while you're in the middle of it. Tuesday was not the end of anything, but things sure got dark. And here's the thing: history is steeped with examples of people who fought through the darkness in the glow of candlelight, people who knew, like my father taught me that night in 1981, that defeat paves the way for triumph. In fact, many who have fought in defense of human rights and freedom and liberty and democracy around the world did not themselves live long enough to enjoy the fruits of their labor. But the seeds were planted, and they flourished, in some cases after they were gone. Those people understood that the fight was bigger than they were. It was important to keep going, to nurture the seeds of democracy into a tree under whose canopy later generations will seek shelter and whose fruit later generations will eat. We do this. We fight not simply for ourselves, but for the future of democracy. Susan B. Anthony dedicated her life to social justice, particularly a woman's right to vote. For 45 years, she fought for women's suffrage with little obvious success. In 1869, just after the end of the Civil War, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution eliminated voting discrimination based on race, but not on gender. The 15th Amendment gave black men the right to vote, at least on paper. For many years, of course, the country largely ignored the 15th Amendment, manufacturing ways to suppress the black vote until the civil rights movement of the 1960s. But nevertheless, the overt exclusion of women was a huge blow to Susan B. Anthony and to women across America. And yet, they persisted. The 19th Amendment to the Constitution was first proposed 8 years later, in 1878, and it would be another 42 years after that that white women would be able to vote freely. A freedom which is now the norm was for 50 years after the end of the Civil War considered a non-starter. During the Civil Rights Movement, countless individuals fought for years against segregation, from Rosa Parks to Ruby Bridges to Thurgood Marshall, the Little Rock Nine, the Freedom Riders, John Lewis, Dr. Martin Luther King. Black Americans endured decades of discrimination, ridicule, and violence. Defeat after defeat along the way. It wasn't until the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 99 years after the end of the Civil War, that segregation was officially outlawed in public places and Jim Crow laws were banned. Conflict often produces change, but change is slow, often not looking like change at all. In the case of this week, looking a whole lot like a setback. But today's setbacks are tomorrow's comebacks, and the comeback is our work. As my father taught me all those years ago, the fact that your side did not win is not a loss. It is simply a sign that your work is not yet done. And frankly, in 1775, in 1776, in 1783, in 1861, in 1865, in 1964, our work was not done. And it may never be done because democracy is dynamic and norms change, and we will confront issues in the future that we didn't know are issues today. And we will continue to fight. Now, I know that one of the toughest things to reconcile is the fact that half of America made a choice with which you inherently disagree. But maybe you found out that your neighbor, your friend, maybe your mom or your brother voted for the guy who wants to take your freedoms away. And that is a tough reality to come to terms with. As James Baldwin once said, quote, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist," end quote. Yes, votes were cast by people who would oppress and deny the humanity of some of us. But that fact is not true of all of the 73 million plus people who voted for Donald Trump. There are people out there, good people, who fell for his lies, but I believe do not wish to see pregnant women bleeding out in parking lots or the earth burn up or immigrants deported. And those are our fellow citizens with whom we must engage. There is neither time nor space for cynicism about politics today. The right to engage in politics is a privilege, one which my parents did not grow up with. It is a privilege we cannot give up and one of which we cannot tire. Cynicism about politics is a luxury of those who have never had to experience life without it. And if those people ever truly lost their ability to participate in the system, they'd never take it for granted again. This is going to be a challenge. The end of the tunnel is there, but it's too far away to see the light right now. So we will use flashlights until we get closer to the other side. We'll hold them for each other. But what you have, what we have, is agency, our voice. America chose a republic over a monarchy 248 years ago. We still have that republic. But Benjamin Franklin's admonition comes back to remind us time and again, we have a republic if we can keep it. And now, that is our work.